Okay, hello and welcome to Crossy's Corner. This is a first for me. I'm not going to spend my time looking at the camera because it's the first that we're live, and I'm here with the one and only Tom Mackintosh, Kiwi in Britain, president of the Oxford University Boat Club this year. Boat race is only 30 odd days away, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here in your rowing library, Tom.
It is, yeah. No, this is. I did notice a lot of rowing paraphernalia on the walls coming in here. So that's actually one thing I noticed. The first thing when I came to the UK, and particularly in Oxford, is just the history of rowing here, and it's the imaging is almost everywhere with the blades and certain crews of old. So you can really feel the passion and the deep history the sport has in Oxford.
Had you spent much time in the UK before?
Not really, no. So typically after like a World Championships or games, you'd have a bit of a holiday after that. And so I might come here for a week or so after that to visit my two sisters living in the UK, and a lot of Kiwis are there now as well. But honestly, other than that, not really, no. Like I hadn't spent an extended period of time here at all.
So you're not going to be like Grace Prendergast, like, come over from New Zealand and think, oh, I like it here, and...
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. You never know what the future holds, but there's a lot of Kiwis in London at the moment, and outside of sort of my rowing life, I feel very fortunate to have an amazing group of friends, sort of outside of that sphere, and so if I can sort of find some work in the UK, then I'd sort of definitely look into that as an option. Yeah.
Now let's talk rowing. How's your day been so far?
Yeah, pretty good. So pretty standard day for a day in the life of Tom. Woke up, went for a row down at Wallingford there. And it was a really nice morning. The stream is down and the river levels are low, which is good for us because it has been quite challenging at times. And then, came back here, got stuck in a bit of traffic, had some breakfast, and now I have the pleasure of talking with you, Crossy.
That's pretty cool, actually. So how was the boat going this morning?
Yeah, it was good. We had a fun session, actually. So what do we do? Pretty standard 8th row, up and down the river, a few power strokes. Just building confidence, building morale, building the patterning with the lads. And, the boat's feeling good, and I'm really excited to see what we can do in about 30 days.
Yeah. Now, you've had some fixtures.
Yeah.
One against London Rowing Club, I know, one against Thames. I'm trying to think if you've had any others.
Not really, no. We do some internal racing, more in probably mixed dates at the start of the season, I'd say. But we haven't really had any other formal fixtures against other clubs here. So
you won the fixture against London, although I think that they might have led you a bit in the second piece, Spice tell me. It was a more comprehensive result against Thames Rowing Club. So how did you see the boat between those two fixtures?
I think the difference between those two fixtures is just, it's a classic in 8s rowing, is just bedding in that confidence and that rhythm and that patterning within one another, especially when you're under certain amounts of pressure. I think we're trending in the right direction. There's still work to be done, as always is the case with sort of these types of campaigns. I'm excited to see what we can do, and looking forward to the next few fixtures coming up, and hopefully we can just keep making the incremental gains that we need to do.
Now, the crew is obviously not set, but I know you're playing around. So it was Nick Rusher at stroke, I think, for the London fixture, and Nick Cole, the Italian, at stroke for the London Rowing Club fixture. Why did you think about those changes, or why did Mark Fangenhall, your coach, think about those changes?
Yeah, I think it's both bring an incredible amount of experience to the crew, and both are very good stroke seats. Nico stroked as 4 in a very competitive race in the Olympics there, and Nick, he's just a good stroke seat in general. I don't know what boats he stroked internationally as such, but like he's got a good rhythm and a good patterning. So I think in terms of swapping them round, it's more just we're just building an 8, right? And so we're just trying to eke out as much speed as we possibly can, and you're sort of always mixing combinations up just to make sure that when we do line up on boat race day, that you're very confident that you've got the right people in the right seats. And I think what's impressive about swapping those two round is that both could easily sit in that stroke seat role.
Yeah.
And so whatever happens, like, we'll have full confidence in their ability,
Yeah.
which is quite cool because it's really nice just to have that faith in your teammates.
Did you ever fancy trying out the stroke seat for yourself?
Not really, no.
Why?
I don't know. I think I just quite like being in the mix. I sat at 7 for a long time in our Kiwi 8 and other 8s campaigns of old, and then obviously made the switch to the bow seat. I think you're just in the mix, you know. You can follow people. You got people behind you. You're sort of in the heart of it. Not that stroke seat isn't, but yeah, I just sort of prefer it in the middle of the boat. And I actually just think there's better stroke seats out there than me. So better to put your assets up there, I think.
Let's just talk broad picture, because obviously you're a boat race newbie.
Yeah.
And that's unusual in a sense because you're Oxford president.
Yes.
So how much did you need to be persuaded to take that role? Like, you know, like, Tom, we want you in here. Or how much were you just like, yeah, I can do that?
Maybe initially I was quite reluctant, I'd say. So I had some conversations with some alumni and they suggested that I should sort of pitch for the role. So there's quite a formal process you need to go through to sort of be considered for the role, in terms of a member needs to nominate you and that's seconded by another member, and then you have to pitch for 7.5 minutes to to the members of your boat club, and then there's 7.5 minutes of Q&A, and then you sort of leave the room and they deliberate, and then they have a vote, and then the president is announced. And yeah, so I had some pretty, I wouldn't say it was grueling, but and standoffish isn't the right word either, but I think they were curious as to why, maybe not an outsider, but someone that doesn't have Oxford Boat Club experience was pitching for this role. And while I was initially reluctant to take it on, I actually thought it was actually a really nice thought that some alumni thought I should be considered for the role as well. And also the opportunity sort of presented itself, and I thought it's actually a really cool thing to be a part of. And so, you know, like, why wouldn't you? If people are sort of suggesting you should do it, and look, you could have turned it down and I think we would have been fine either way. But then it's actually quite nice just to be, you're in the heart of it as well. You're there. I'm really enjoying working with Mark. He's a great communicator and a great coach, and we've sort of built our relationship together, which is really cool. And then you can sort of be a mouthpiece to the crew and rally the troops when needed. But then in terms of leadership within the boat, like I said before, we've got lots of experienced athletes in there. So like, I can lean on them and they can lean on me. And I think we all work really well together, which is really enjoyable. Has
anything surprised you about being president in terms of the amount of work or responsibility, or is it just as you thought it would be?
I think presidents of old maybe have commented on the sort of administration hurdle or like weight you had to take on. And I made it quite clear in my pitch that I wasn't, if you want a leader to sort of handle that type of stuff, then there's probably better people for that job. I like to be in the mix with the lads, trying to lead by example as best I can, getting in there, taking strokes with the boys. And so, yeah, I made that clear, and if they wanted that, then that was cool, and if they didn't, then we actually had 2 other really good candidates for the role as well, so sort of send your vote that way. So I've actually just forgotten what the start of that question was.
No, I was just saying how if it was tougher than you thought it would be.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's very unique, I think. Like a lot of things that I'm sort of quickly learning over here. While there's a lot of similarities between New Zealand culture and UK culture, there's a few things that are just a little bit different. And so getting your head around that in terms of certain nuances to maybe, I don't know if etiquette's the right word, but just, I guess, the way things are done around here.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually, Oxford Boat Club's in a really cool place. So we've, obviously there's been a changeover, sort of changing of the guard, you could say. But with that, I think everyone's really open to new ideas, new way of doing things. And I just think that's a cool place for it to be at when you come into a leadership role like this.
Yeah, how much of the sense of like the boat race history? So Oxford men have won that race in 2022, but otherwise Cambridge have been pretty much on a roll.
Yeah.
Is that a thing or not for the boat club?
I wouldn't necessarily say like it's a thing, but it's an interesting one because there is such a fierce rivalry between the two clubs, which I think is actually really cool. And to be honest, I don't actually think I quite fully understand that just yet. And I'll probably maybe get my head around it in about 10 years' time, with these things. Because when you're right in the mix, you're sort of focusing on what you can do and your processes. And the unique thing about the boat races, you've got the athletes racing, and then you've got sort of 200 years of history behind that, and there'll be another 200 years of history in the future for as long as the race endures. And so with that, you've got such a wide range of very invested stakeholders, I think, from both Oxford and from Cambridge, which is very unique, and it is a very cool thing to be a part of. In terms of where Oxford's at, like I said, I think we're in a really cool place, and obviously you want to win the race, and that's the goal, to win the boat race. But we're just focusing on what we can do and improving our processes and making our athletes and better people as well. And just building a program that is attractive for young athletes coming through. And hopefully we can start to build a bit of a legacy this time around. And look, whatever happens on race day will happen on race day. But I think what I really enjoy about working with at Oxford is the people there. Like, there's some really cool people. There's some very, very intelligent people as well, as you get at these universities. And I find that really inspiring.
Well, let's talk about the people. Mark Fangan-Hall, you mentioned your close relationship with him. Talk about his coaching style. I mean, maybe, I don't know if it's helpful to look and compare him to Tony O'Connor.
Yeah.
Your Olympic 8s coach in Tokyo, and similarities or differences, or maybe another way, or with Gary who coached you.
Yeah, sure. So we can. Do you want me to draw comparisons?
Love that.
Okay, so I think the first thing I noticed about Mark was his passion for it. Like, he loves it, and my passion for the sport comes and goes. I think deep down I am really passionate about it because I am a rower and an oarsman, but I think I also have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, as I'm sure a lot of athletes do at times. But it is actually really inspiring to see Mark's passion for it, and what he's investing in, his own time, his own energy, his sort of morale and willpower is really rubbing off on the lads. And I think that's just quite cool, because when you're out there in the coach boat, you're out rowing and he's in the coach boat, you can just sort of feel the energy that he's bringing, which I really like as well. And in terms of us working together, I think we're really leaning on each other's skill sets quite well. So I've sort of taken this leadership position as, look, I have some sort of experience in 8s rowing, and this is what I think, but you're the decision maker, Mark, and so I'll give you my opinion, but I won't take anything personally if you decide to go the other way. And I think that's it's quite a cool place to be, because then maybe in the past, when I was a bit of a younger athlete and maybe a little bit less mature, you used to sort of stew on those things a bit. That's been a really enjoyable thing, working with Mark. If we go back to Tony, I think, Tony, he spoke the language of rowing very well, I think. And it was a language that I only sort of started to truly understand a bit later on in my career, just in terms of boat feel and we're getting right into the rowing sort of nerd here, but when the boat's moving through the water and you're sort of picking up and levering it, and the sensations that you're feeling underneath you. I remember Tony and I would often have conversations, but we weren't actually really saying that much. Like, the physical dialogue was sort of quite low, but we just knew what we meant, if that makes sense. And that built a lot of trust within us. Tony, I think his sort of main I don't know if advantage is the right word, but a real skill that he had was, and I don't know if it's just because he's Irish and his accent, but he just had a very calming demeanor about him, and he could sort of say anything to you and you'd buy into it.
Yeah.
Like even if he was dropping you from the team or something, you'd probably sort of be, oh, this is the right call, you know. A very soothing way about things. He might say, we've got a 300-kilometre week coming up, but the way he could phrase it was like, oh yeah, only 300 kilometres, you know, which I think was really cool. And obviously he's competitive, and he wanted us to win, and he wanted us to do well. But I think he sort of looked at us as people first, and sort of worked with that to mould the person into a good person and a good athlete as well. When maybe historically in the past it was just more of a crack the whip attitude.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. For previous New Zealand oarsmen, which had a lot of success as well. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think maybe Tony tried to change the mindset around that, which was quite cool, I think.
Yeah. I guess he's quite different to Dick Tobbs.
Yes, very different. Yeah, very different.
In that sense.
Yeah. So I was
or Ian Wright.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I was never coached by Ian or Dick, but you do hear stories from both. Yeah, like we got, obviously Hamish was a huge leader and mentor in our crew, and he was maybe shaped by Dick for certain periods of time, and obviously it turned Hamish into a great oarsman.
Yeah.
Is that the way I would want to be coached? Look, maybe not, but then again, they won a lot of medals as well. So is it a trade-off? Could they have done it another way? Who really knows? That's probably a question you'd have to ask them, I think.
How this might not be appropriate to look at the way you rode, like particularly, I know the talk you had between the heat in the Olympics in 21, which you lost, and then the Recachage, which you won, and there was this phrase, big boy rowing.
Yep.
How much is your blue boat looking for that style, or is it not appropriate or different because it's on, over a different length? Or...
Yeah, good question. I think it is appropriate, and it's a little bit different because, yes, it is a different length. But I think eights rowing is eights rowing, right? Like it needs, maybe in the past, I certainly looked at an eight in a different lens, in the sense that maybe when I was sort of coming through, I remember the like Aussie Men's 4, they were sort of the cream of the crop at the time, and they were moving the boat really well. And the Germans coming through, maybe rating. And they were sort of rating like in the 39-40s, and the Germans maybe around that 38, 39 mark, typically a little bit higher rating. And in my mind, I remember thinking, rowing's changing to being a more high rating game, because there was a lot of success coming out from that. And you'd have these old dogs, the convener of selectors, he's who would sort of say, you're rating too high, you need to bring it down and row longer and stronger. And I remember thinking, like, oh, shut up, like, you're just an old guy now, like, trying to tell us to row in a certain way, because I thought the sport was shifting. And look, there was just a naive 21-year-old, I suppose, in that lens, because we found real true speed in our eight. Like, we were always a fast eight. Like, they weren't qualifying for the games, and maybe they're on the wrong side of the finish a few times, but it's not like they were slow, really. But I think finding that true speed was when we actually just gave the boat time to run, and really sympathetic to the hull underneath us, and rowed as long as we possibly could, and as strong as we possibly could. And if you look at eights, like, I think a visual representation of how it felt we rowed was, if you look at the Canadian eight, 08, like they just went for it, and it's like their backs are hitting the riggers, and they're drawing up to their neck, and you sort of look at it and you think it looks a bit funny, right? But it's, in my mind, I look at that and I think that is how an eight should feel, because the thing's like bouncing underneath you, it's hucking, it's a little bit out of control, but you're applying the right amount of weight through the water, and if you're fast enough, then you just have all this time on the recovery that it's sort of tweaking out, but you can sort of go with the ebb and flow of the boat, I think.
Yeah, I remember that eight winning. And
the Canadian eight. It's a cool race. I watch it all the time,
So also talking about people, you've got the Olympic gold medal eights cox at Oxford.
Yes, Harry. Yeah.
How is that working in terms of what input does he have, broadly speaking, to the Oxford Blue Boat?
Yeah, so Harry's been great, and I think it's a real asset to have him on board, and it's very exciting that he's looking to go down a coaching pathway as well, because he's obviously got a vast amount of knowledge in the sport, and he speaks the language of rowing, I think, which is quite cool. Even just having some conversations with him about the success that he had in his eights programs, and if I compare that to the success that we had, we're sort of saying the same thing a lot of the time in terms of, again, real sort of rowing nerd trivia here, but the way you take the water and the sensations you're feeling and leaving the boat and rate for speed and all that and approach to coming out the start. So it's really cool having him on board with that. And I imagine him and Mark sort of have a lot of conversations as well about how eight should be going, but I'm not privy to those as such. But Harry has taken the lightweights on board at the moment, and so he's sort of shaping them to be better oarsmen, and he's also building the program as well. So he's starting to get some colleges involved as well, which I think is a really great initiative to sort of help bolster the foundation of that group, and then you can sort of start to create something that can be a bit more enduring.
I want to look at some of the personalities. I'm just going to ask you a question, but you can duck this question. I know you've got the telemetry, and which tells you how much power. I know the idea is that you don't have one person putting the most power out. You have everybody on a similar power. Who pulls the most watts in your boat?
Oh, good question. Probably depends what day of the week it is, maybe. Depends who you ask, I suppose, because this is actually one thing I love about rowers is they'll always put themselves in situations where they come out on top, right? So you ask any athlete who pulls the most watts, they'll probably say that they do. But I think if we look at this morning, actually, I think Tass von Mueller, he sort of took the crown this morning, which is exciting to see. So he's a great athlete as well, actually, and I think he's sort of coming on to something that could be quite cool for him if he wants to sort of pursue the national team. I think it's different. Well, who knows? Actually, maybe I can't comment on that because that's his life. But he's very diligent and he trains well and he can put out serious amounts of power when he needs to. So I think if he wants to go down that pathway, I think it's an opportunity that he could definitely explore.
Yeah, James Doran is another powerful athlete.
Yeah, James does it. Yeah, he's a big, strong guy. So, he's been in eights programs with obviously when Oxford Brooks were sort of doing quite well there, and he's looking to break into the GB team as well, which is exciting to see. But he's a big, strong guy. Nick Rusher, he can lay down when he needs to as well. So can Nico actually. And then we've got some.
Did you see that sprint of the Italian four in Varese?
I did. Yeah, impressive. Very Italian. Very Italian. Yeah, I wouldn't ever want to be next to an Italian in the last 100 meters of a race.
Yeah. So that's Nick and Nick, and then you've got Tom Sharrock.
Tom Sharrock. Yep. So he's I think he's matured a lot this season, which is really cool to see. Very diligent in his training. He's very committed, which is cool. I don't know if he's wanting to sort of pursue any national teams or something, but again, that's his choice if he wants to. But no, it's been cool to watch him progress throughout the season, which has been really exciting. And then younger guys, we've got Saxo, who's sort of finding his feet, which is good to see. And he's had some. I think he's a junior world champion. I want to say so. That's impressive. Yeah, it's impressive. Was it Cox or a straight four?
Yeah, I can't remember which one he's in, but he's right up there.
Yeah,
smooth guy, and he did so well in the 5K trial with.
They did, So him and Felix, which is cool to see. I'm glad I didn't have to do those 5K trials. But no, it was cool to see. Like, they're obviously moving the small boat well, which is cool because that's actually one thing that's interesting about the programs over here is it is very big boat focused, and maybe it's just a numbers thing. You just can take the eights out. Whereas back home, we're very small boat focused and sort of you sort of earn your stripes, I think, in terms of moving the small boat, and then you sort of progress into the big boats. And then we've got Will O'Connell as well, who's
Canadian.
No, he's Australian.
Oh God, right, okay,
yeah. So he was a decent rower back in Australia, and he's given it a really good crack this season, which is, again, it's very inspiring to see. So we've got a lot of sort of athletes in this program that are committing to the training program really well. And it is, like I said before, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the sport, but if I'm seeing these other members of our boat club really committing, then it does inspire me. And I think that's the beauty of the sport, really. Like, while there might be times when I can give inspiration to other members of our crew, I definitely lean off all our team members as well, which I really like.
And your cox, you from Westminster School, Tideway.
Yeah, Toby. Yeah, so Toby's great. He's I think he's a fantastic cox, and he obviously knows the Tideway quite well, which I'm told is a very important role in this race. And I'm starting to figure out.
I'd say so. You took I don't know whether to call it brave or definite decision to go back to New Zealand to your sister's wedding. Which I thought was a great shout, because family comes first in that way. How hard was that decision for you to make, and what did it cost you?
Yeah, I suppose what did it cost me? Well, the plane tickets weren't cheap, that's for sure. I think I'd made that call pretty early on in the season, actually even before I pitched for the presidency role. And so I just wanted to get that out in the open, that this was going to be a non-negotiable for me. And while I'm completely committed to this boat club and want us to succeed as much as we can, I'm very, very fortunate to have a very supportive family. And I think you've even met them on tour a few times. They're at every regatta, whether it's in Czech Republic, Serbia, Henley, you name it, they've been there. And so I get inspiration from them, and I feel very fortunate that they are there to support me, and it makes me a better athlete as well. And Kate's wedding was obviously a massive moment for her, and her now husband Pat. And Pat's a huge rowing supporter as well.
Oh wow!
Which is really cool. And so while depending on what hat you put on, it was the only decision I could make, really. And I had to be there to support Kate through that day. And maybe actually when I made the decision, I thought it would be easier than it was, because when I was back home watching the boys hit it out on a very cold, windy day on the Tideway, I did get a bit of FOMO. But again, I like to think we have a really cool crew and a great bunch of lads, and look, anything can happen on any one day, and one day one athlete might get injured or sick, or whether that's me or someone else, it doesn't really matter. And I think if we can create a crew that is strong even without some of its members, then that puts us in a good place.
One thing that struck me about that was at the finish line with the two Oxford trial boats coming together, and just congratulating each other. Not that the Cambridge squad don't have a great move, but it was a kind of sign or something, which I thought was significant.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It looked like a hard race as well. Nico took his boat up quite fast, and then Nick just sort of sat on the rhythm, rating a few beats lower, and then they came around that bend and all hell broke loose with bloody waves crashing over the riggers, and it looked tough. Like I say, I had FOMO from the race, but actually as I was sort of cozying up on the couch watching everyone get soaked in clashing blades, maybe I was happy sitting there with my cup of tea. But yeah, I've said this a few times, I think the club's in a cool spot. And yes, there's been a changing of the guard, and look, maybe we haven't had the success that we wanted to in the years gone by. But that's cool. That just happens in any sort of long-standing sporting tradition, or maybe franchise. We're not essentially a franchise, but sports teams do have their ups and their downs, and that's just sort of the nature of the beast at times. But there is a sense of camaraderie, an eagerness to learn, actually. And the boys are very resilient as well, which is something that I've picked up on in terms of at times it is quite challenging to row here, just whether it's flooding, weather,
Yeah.
or just things pop up that very unexpected. You have to change plan on the fly, and there'll be some timing or whatever it is. But the boys, they just get on with the job. Don't worry about it. We're here to row. Let's get the job done, and everyone's supporting each other through that. Which, I personally think that's really cool.
Have you got any more matchups, fixtures? And who they get? You've got one on the 29th.
We've got one on the 29th. Yeah, I don't know exactly who that's up against yet, but we were meant to have Oxford Brooks and Leander.
Yeah.
But they've pulled out.
That's such a bummer.
Oh, it is a bit of a bummer, yeah.
I think there isn't really the standard crew. I mean, I know you beat London and Thames, and all credit to those crews, but you kind of want to be really, really tested.
Yeah, you do. You do want to be tested, and you need to see how people react under pressure and whatnot. So, yeah, I suppose that's just like I said, things just pop up like that, and that's just the nature of the season. And so, while you would like to have very testing racing in these fixtures, and if the races aren't necessarily going the distance like you thought they might, then you've just got to employ strategies to sort of simulate that in training. Really.
Yeah, I was almost thinking St Paul's School, because they're quicker than both London and Thames. Give them a start.
Well, actually, often we did think about that. We've sort of been throwing a lot of very quirky ideas around in terms of how can we replicate a boat race, essentially. And so, yeah, like I'm actually a bit removed from that in terms of, because I'm not Oxford or London local, in terms of trying to facilitate or organise fixtures and whatnot. But I know Mark's putting a lot of effort into trying to replicate a boat race environment.
Yeah. How often have you watched past boat races and tried to learn from them, or is that something a route you don't want to go down?
No,
I want to be in the present.
No, I started watching. Obviously, I'd watched them live.
Yeah.
I think I watched like the last few, but I've really started getting down the rabbit hole. Actually, the day I pitched for the presidency, I thought, okay, this is getting real now. I should probably actually start to do some research on this race, because like I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of history and passion and real aficionados of the sport that know a lot about it. And you could name a year and they could tell you who won by how many lengths or what the margin was, and when the crew took the lead and when the blade clashes were. So there's a lot of people with a lot of knowledge about the sport. And while in this short time, I'm probably not going to be able to get to that level, I have been watching a few, just to see how, when lead changes happens and when the blade clashes happen and how the boat moves around the corners and all that sort of quirky stuff that is actually only really associated with the boat race.
Cam Keelty, who's watching, because I'm not looking at the screen, sorry Cam, but he's an aficionado of Crossy's Corner.
Oh yeah.
And he's asked, what was the pair like with Hamish Bond training pre-Tokyo?
What was the pair? Oh no, yeah, that was an amazing pair. Yeah, so obviously Bondi's probably one of the best, well, he is the best pairs rower of all time, him and Eric, and he committed a lot of his life to turning the pair sort of into an art form. Like, he's obviously physically very capable, but I think the way he takes the water, everything about it, I'd say is very, very efficient. I think that all sort of started we did a bike race around Taupo.
Yeah.
And in the, not pre-season, but sort of at the start of the season. And obviously Hamish is very capable on a bike. And so he was sort of leading the charge. And I was actually meant to sit sort of 4 or 5 people behind him.
Yeah.
And what would happen was he would roll off. And because we're in a bunch of, say, 150 riders, he's not rolling to the back of the bunch.
Yeah.
So I would pull back and he would just slot in front of me.
Right.
But then what happened was the guy in front of me came back and I pulled back to let him in. And he sort of looks at me and is like, nah, I'm done. I need to go rest up on the back. And so this meant I was on Hamish's wheel right on the front of this massive peloton.
Oh, wow.
And this is the first bike race I've ever been a part of. And I'm thinking, I'm not meant to be up here. This is not my place. Anyway, Hamish rolls and he's expecting to see this other athlete and instead he sees me. And his first comment is, "What are you doing here?" And I'm thinking, I don't know. But I just had to look at him and said, "Nah, I'm good for it. Like, I've got this." And I just did not have it. But I just had to, I wasn't going to back down in that moment, you know. And he sort of looks at me and goes, "Oh, all right, good luck, like your funeral kind of thing." And so I just sat on the front and just went as hard as I could for about 7 minutes or something. And then thought, right, I'm going to actually explode here. So sort of took a few deep breaths, played it cool, peeled off, and then just sat in the middle for the next hour and recovered my energy. And then eventually we sort of finished the race at a similar time. And I think after that race, honestly, that moment, like in the following weeks, he said, "Oh, do you want to come row the pier with me?"
Whoa.
And I thought, this is like a dream come true. You know, I used to think about this moment as a kid, as I was coming through the sport. And yeah, it just sort of worked because he was coming back from injury. And so we'd jump in the pier, and I guess he liked what I was doing. And he wouldn't really say much, but we just sort of roll along. And he's insanely fast off the front. Like at paddling, he could pretty comfortably have about between 1 and 3 degrees catch slip, putting out a lot of watts.
Whoa.
And it's all front-ended. So he just really tweaked the boat around the front. And then for me, it was just a case of in the bow, like I'm not going to physically overpower him, right? Because he's Hamish, right? But I sort of quickly realized if I could just hit the catch, not earlier than him, just a little bit earlier, it meant that I could have a little bit of leverage advantage on him, and he could really go for it, and I could just sort of sit there, and it wasn't as tiring for me. And he sort of just said that feels pretty good. And then we started doing some race rate pieces, and I remember thinking, okay, I'm in the pier with Hamish Bond. I need to put my soul onto this oar to keep the thing going. And so I started like heaving on it, and he turns around and goes, "What are you doing, mate? Like, just relax. That's not how you row. Just do what you've been doing and just relax and move well." And then I think we did a piece at 32 or 34 rate. And he sort of goes, "Oh, how does that feel?" And I go, "Oh, yeah, it felt pretty good. It's just sort of moving with you." And he's like, "Yeah, well, we're sort of a couple of splits below world record pace there." And I was like, "Hang on, that's not right." And he's like, "No, that's it." And then that was a big, massive sort of light bulb moment for me, in the sense that efficiency is where it's at, and you've just got to be able to hit that point and stay there for as long as possible.
Wow.
That's
fantastic. Thank you for asking that, Cam. I hope you loved that as much as I did. Another thing in the pair, which was sensational, was your Henley win against Tom George and Ollie Griffith, both light blues. Tell us about that race and that win.
Honestly, that was, I don't think I've actually told Tom and Ollie this, but that was one of the hardest races of my life.
Really?
Like coming, I've never raced at Henley before, and it's a very unique body of water in the sense that there's a lot of current and flow and wash and whatnot, and that sort of caught Matt and I by surprise a bit, like how much the boat is moving underneath you. It's actually quite hard to get into a really sustainable rhythm. And I remember we saw the draw, and if we'd all won our races, we would be racing each other in the final there. And I think they'd won World Cup 1 and we'd won World Cup 2. And so it was sort of like a, let's see. Not a showdown, but it was like a maybe targeted for that. And Matt and I were going well, and we did the start, and I think whatever happened, we got caught on the current or something. And honestly, we just almost rode straight into the booms on the side there. Like if you watch the race, for the bird's eye view, we sort of do this. And they just jumped on us. And I just remember thinking, oh, we're just going to hit these booms. And my oar honestly got as close as it physically could without crabbing, like honestly within a millimeter. And I just remember thinking, oh, well, that's race over. But it didn't hit the booms. And I was like, okay, we're not on the booms, and we're sort of still in this race. And I remember seeing their boat, and I just thought, okay, we've just got to knuckle down here, and this is not going to be a pretty race. Nothing about this race is going to feel good, but we're just going to have to work our asses off just to sit there, because if they got away too much, then the race is kind of over. And I remember, because it's a slightly longer race and all your sort of distance markers are a bit out of whack from what I was used to. But then I just remember seeing the stern of their boat and sort of their steering, and I remember thinking, we're like right here, like let's just keep going. And then I don't know if it was the current or however it works, but we just found the rhythm and the flow that I think is what Matt and I were sort of capable of. And then we just sort of started creeping up on them. And I remember thinking, this is maybe a turning point in the race. So I was like, I'm just going to commit completely to this point in the race and not worry about the last 200 meters, because otherwise it's might be a bit late. And I think Tom had just broken the 5K world record maybe at that stage. So I was like, I know these guys have got huge engines on them. So if he wants to just turn it on, then like maybe he could, because I'd never raced him before in a small boat. And sometimes with like athletes with big ergs, they just have this ability just to like light it up out of nowhere. And honestly, that last 250 meters was complete lactate, half slide, just like close your eyes and just get through here kind of thing. And I remember thinking, I just really wanted the goblet. Like I was like, this is just such a unique, cool kind of thing to have, and another quirky thing about rowing that you can do. Who knows what is going to happen in the future? So the moment is now, and let's just go for it.
Oh, that's awesome. I loved hearing that. So how does a very gregarious extrovert person, I assume you're an extrovert.
Maybe an extroverted introvert.
Okay, right. Do you mean a socially skilled introvert?
Depends what you define as social skills.
Okay, all right. So how do you end up? I know you love rowing in the 8. You love the camaraderie. How do you end up in a single scull?
Yeah, great question. So after 22 world champs, I decided I needed some time away from the sport, and I just wanted to see what else was out there. I felt like I was sort of getting behind what might turn into a professional career outside of rowing, and I just needed to explore that. And so I started sort of interning at an investment fund up in Auckland. And honestly, one day there, I just remember thinking, I'm a head taller than everyone in this office, and I'm sitting at this desk just wasting my body away that I've spent years investing into. And at the fund, you're always talking about like compound interest and lots of different financial terms and investments and time and all that. And I just thought, I've invested a lot of time into sort of turning my body into a thing that can pull an oar in a boat in the water. And actually the Olympics isn't that far away, really. I think it was about 16 months at the time.
Wow. And
then I was like, okay, I need to come back. I'm very unfit. So I'm probably not just going to be able to just slot straight back into the New Zealand team. My training program is going to be different to sort of the current crop of athletes there at the moment. So that was sort of trending towards the single anyway. And before I took a break from the sport, I had a chat with my coach, Gary, and he was sort of hinting that you should give the single a crack. And I'd been like competitive domestically in it. I'd never raced at national champs or anything, but like in our 8s program, we broke down in singles for the first 12 weeks. And so just honestly grinded my way through that, had some really successful training rows.
How'd you get on against Hamish?
We never actually raced. Actually, the one time I wanted to like have a crack at him in the single was I actually would have loved to had a few proper races with him. He probably would have beaten me, but who knows, maybe I'll just say I would have beaten him because it never happened. We were rowing up, I was rowing up the lake, and he was sort of about maybe 50 meters ahead of me or something. And typically you row up to the pylon, there's a big...
I know it.
You stop at the pylon, have a drink, and then you go up and down the lake. He saw me getting on the water, and he knew that I would be having a crack at him, right? And he had come back from an injury, so he just sort of wanted to go for just a paddle essentially. And I knew that, so I thought this is a good opportunity to have a crack at him. And if I start rowing next to him, he's too competitive to not go for it.
Yeah.
Like he just doesn't operate like that.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of rowing up, and I was like, okay, he was like a wee way ahead, so I had to just sort of sacrifice my break just to get up the next to him. And I was just so in the zone, thinking I'm going to sort of try get him on this day. And then I remember thinking, oh, this pylon is nearby, isn't it? And I took a stroke, and then I turn around, and I just see this big grey mass, and I just smacked it and hit my head and my back and rock. So it's got like the you've got your pillars and then like the big concrete crossbar thing.
Yeah.
And I just went under it and like smoked myself, and then sort of came to, and I was like, I'm underneath this pylon here, because I just completely forgot I was there. And then the only way I could get out was I had to lie down and pull my oar all the way in, and then sort of back down like this, while the pylon bar was like scraping above here.
Wow.
Just the weirdest experience.
Yeah.
And I was a bit like loopy because I just hit my head and all my back was grazed. And so I was like, oh, maybe today is not the day. So then rode and took it in, and then jumped on the bike and healed up. Yeah. And then I think, for whatever reason, we never actually had a proper match-up. Oh, that's so interesting. You were in one of the great single sculls races, the 2023. Yes, final. Yeah. What do you remember about that race? Yeah, I remember thinking, so obviously my time in the single was quite a steep learning curve. Yeah. In the sense that also, in terms of timing my run, 16 months out was probably the sort of shortest amount of time that could practically be possible to get a result or whatever. And so I was literally learning something every day, every stroke, every race I did. And so I put a lot of energy in the start. You just have to go for it in that first K, because obviously Ollie's very, very competitive in that first half of the race, and he just gets out in front and builds confidence and sits there, and he can control the race that way. Yeah. And so single sculls nowadays, well, at least if he's in the race, if you're not doing like a 1:38 in that first 500, you may as well not turn up. Whereas if you talk to someone like Mahe, he'd just be sort of 140s the whole way through. Yeah. Whereas like a Ollie, he might even do like a 35 or a 34 in that first 500, and then like maybe a slower last 500, I'd say. So spend a lot of energy just to be in the race, and then you're sort of in the race. And I remember I was sort of in second place there for a second, and I remember thinking, I'm actually not feeling too bad here. Like, let's just sort of keep going and see where this takes me. And Simon is an incredible single scull as well, so he was part of that. And Spheri maybe wasn't as competitive as he would have liked to have been in that final, but he'd rode through me in the semi. Like I remember, like the body would give way with about 50 meters to go, and he just pushed through me in that semi-final. But then, Stefanos was coming up so hot in that last sort of 300. And I just remember thinking, like, you're not taking this medal from me. Like, I've just got to keep going. And him pushing up on me, pushed me up on Simon, then Simon and me kind of up on Ollie. And so, I had a lot of friends and family in the crowd there as well. And I just remember thinking, look, medals aren't everything. Like, it's not. You're obviously here to have some success. But I just remember thinking this experience would be a whole lot cooler if I could just stand on the dais and sort of celebrate with my supporters. It's you can't really evaluate medals across different disciplines, but I'm going to ask you, like, where does that stand with your Olympic gold medal? Because, like, Steve Redgrave always wanted to be Olympic champion, and he never had a world medal in his single. He won the Commonwealth Games, but that's so very special to have achieved that. Yeah, I think it is. Like, maybe from the outside looking in, you'd probably say the Olympic gold has more like objective value in terms of what people assign to it. But for me, the single was such an incredible journey, and like every boat has their challenges, but the single is like challenging every single day, and it just doesn't let up ever. And a big part of the reason why I sort of went down that pathway was because I thought by the time I'm sort of finished in the sport, if I didn't at least give the single a crack,
Yeah.
then I don't know if I'd be sort of satisfied.
Yeah.
And it is just such a unique boat, and I was in just a position in life where I'd had success in an 8, and that was cool, and that was a lot of that was because of we had a good crew and the timing and the funding, and that worked out. If I'd been coming into sort of my prime 10 years earlier, that would never have been there. And then I sort of thought, oh, well, the single's also here as well, so let's just give that a crack.
Do you feel you're part of the brotherhood of international single scullers? Is there such a thing? I mean, there was the Great 8 a while back, where Mahe rode with his top chop and Alan Campbell and those guys, Andre Sinek. Is it like that now, or
maybe not as? It's definitely matey. Like, they're all good sorts on the single scull. Maybe because those guys competed against each other for like multiple cycles, that they have a very close relationship. But there is, I guess, the brotherhood of single scullers. Like, there's always, that's something that I've benefited from in New Zealand as well. Like Mahe, Robbie, phone call away for any sort of advice, and then get along really well with Simon. He's really cool. Even guys like Melvin Twyler from the Dutch team, he's sort of very fast as well.
I gather Melvin's going for the single with against Simon this year.
Oh, true. Yeah. I'd actually love to see that.
In fact, I think there's about 4 Dutchies in for the Diamond Sculls, or
really?
Well, potentially. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Oh,
I don't know whether you're fancying a crack at the diamonds.
Who knows? A goblet and a diamond would be very cool. That would be very, very cool. I think for me, that would actually be really cool. But you do have to actually win that race. And my priority is obviously the boat race at the moment. So let's just get through that one, and then I'll see what happens.
Yeah. I know you were very proud of your Olympic effort. And that was an insane race. I mean, Zeidler was insane in that regatta. The semi-final was just ridiculous, where he posted the time, broke the Olympic record, I think. What was it like being in a final where, you had such fast guys to compete against?
It was Ollie, obviously he rose to the occasion, and full credit to him. Like, he dominated that race, so that was exceptional to see, really, and a testament maybe to his attitude, approach, and because he's had his ups and downs, and he's sort of dominated those as well. So that was very impressive. It was, for me, like, I think deep down I probably knew I wasn't going for the gold medal, but that was okay. Like, that didn't discourage me. It didn't leave me any less motivated. But I just think realistically that's probably where I was at. But I also knew that if I didn't go for it in that first sort of 1,700 meters, then you're just not actually in the race. And say for me, so first K was good. Then I knew with about 700 meters to go, I needed to start going for it, because the Tuscus was coming up. The athlete neutral sculler, he has a good wind on him as well. Zlati, yes, And so if you're sort of stuck behind, I also know myself, I'm not like an athlete that can just like light it up out of nowhere. Like, I'm like 88 kilos, 6'6". It's not.
What is your 2K PB?
On a Concept 2 550.
Oh, wicked.
And 550 on a Concept 2, and I did that in pre-Tokyo, and I haven't actually really done one since. The single was sort of enough erging for me. So they're coming up. And I knew the Tuscus, if he gets a sniff, he's competitive, right? And I'd sort of analysed that from his previous races. So I knew I had to sort of do damage to him in the middle part of that race. And it meant sort of working through there. It meant with about 100 meters to go, the tank was just sort of completely empty for me. And I think I lost like between 3 to 4 seconds and literally about 80 meters. But if I'd done it any other way, if I'd come up through there and sprinted for a fourth or something, I don't think I would have been able to sprint through for a medal. So the race plan I wanted to do, I executed.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to get messy
Yeah.
at the end. Maybe it just got a little bit messier
Yeah.
than I thought it might.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's, look, I went out and it would have been amazing to have won a medal. Like that, I would have absolutely loved that. To have gone to 2 games and an 8 in a single and medalled in that. I think that was a huge motivating factor for me. But look, that race didn't go my way that day, and look, it happens, and that's just sort of part of the sport. And like I said before, if I sort of assigned too much value on my rowing career to the medals you bring home, then it is a slippery slope, because sometimes you just blow up. And if you don't give yourself the opportunity to be in the race, then you're never in the race anyway. And I think that's a tougher pill to swallow than getting mowed down in 80 metres.
I just want to talk a little bit about identity, because you're an Olympic champion, and that's the thing that you carry with you. And you're here in Oxford, and you're Oxford president. You're also a great family member and a rower. I mean, how do you think people see you?
Oh, good question. I don't know, really. I think I've always only ever sort of seen myself as Tom, and obviously I've got this sort of rowing feather to my hat, I suppose. How do people see me? Good. I think you'd probably need to ask other people that. Crossy, maybe. I'm not really too sure.
Well, I get, I teach history in a school, but I'm kind of like, I'm like the rowing history. I'm always a rower. I'm writing this book about this guy, Frederick Kelly, who was an Australian who won the diamonds 3 times and got a gold in the 1908 Olympics. And he was a brilliant composer and concert pianist. But the musicians always saw him as a rower who played the piano a bit. I'm not sure he saw himself as that.
Yes, I see. I think that's probably true. Like, obviously I am a rower, and it is sort of now in my blood, I suppose. But I think the thing that rowing it's taught me a certain way to approach life, and certain sort of skills that you learn from the sport, whether that's sort of working together with your teammates, performing under pressure, applying yourself to something for long periods of time through discipline, sort of competing on the world stage as well. But the way I see it is, obviously I'm not going to retire financially from the sport. It's just where rowing is at, and that's the situation. But my sort of plan is that it's given me a certain way to compose yourself or to conduct yourself, and that can be very useful later on in life.
When's the last time you watched your 21 Olympic win?
Actually, every time I went home, Dad and I would always watch it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wicked.
Honestly, so we'd be at the dinner table, and the chat would finish, and he'd just sort of look at me and say, should we watch the race? But it's I don't know what happened. Maybe in the floods in Hawke's Bay, it did something to the hard drive of the Sky sports system, because it wasn't there. So I actually haven't watched it in a wee while, really.
Oh, God. I don't know where to find it, actually, because I did commentary on that, and it was a great privilege. But maybe I'll have to try and. I just remember, like, my dad was there in Los Angeles, and he spent the whole race on his haunches with his head in his hands, like this.
So were you Cox 4 in Los Angeles? Yes. Interesting, because we had a good straight 4 that year. New Zealand did. With
Shane O'Brien.
Keith Trask as well. So Keith actually rode with my dad for a period of time, and to a good club level, or senior Premier level. Have a connection to the Los Angeles games through them.
That was so hot, that Costas Force. There was so many great crews in that, world champion crews, the Germans, the Swiss. Just such a hot field.
It was a cool Olympics, actually, LA Games, I mean, Keith came down for a fundraiser, and we were, as you do, comparing medals. And, mine was bigger, so I thought...
they're totally different. The LA medals
they are.
And the Tokyo medal.
I think each host city, as time goes on, tries to one-up the previous host nation, right?
I'm not sure about that,
Oh, yeah.
Has your dad and mum got your medal then?
Where is my? Oh, no, it's in Oxford.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, brought it over here because occasionally you get invited to like a
Yeah,
fundraiser
yeah.
or something, or an event where
Yeah,
you can bring it along, and the attendees of the event are interested.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah.
Okay, so how mentally ready are you now? Like, if 10 out of 10 is okay, I'm mentally ready. Last question is,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
for being on the start on boat race day, or where are you now in terms of?
I think, like, I suppose if you've been in a national team for sort of a more than, let's say, call it 3 years, just for a number, you're sort of always ready to row. I'd say so. Yeah, like we've still got about 5 weeks or something until the day. So you're not going to be making or me personally, I'm not going to be making like quantum leaps in terms of physical gains, but you are just sort of like tightening the screws in terms of your focus, your performance, preparing yourself for race day. So like I'm not 10 out of 10 yet, but I'm sort of approaching that point, I'd say.
Wicked. Okay. Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. First Crossy's Corner face to face. It's definitely fantastic doing that. I hope you're going to have a great boat race campaign. I hope you get everything you wish for.
Yep.
And thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Crossy. Thanks for listening, team, as well.
Thank you. We're going to end the live stream now, and hope you guys have enjoyed it.